Untitled, and I'm here with basically an all-European cast today to talk about Bazaar and kind of what went down and everybody's experiences. So today I'm joined by three guests. So first one is Julian, who we've had on the cast before.
Hey everyone.
So then the next person is Marc. So Marc, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Marc, Bazaar on Twitch and Medigonheim.
And then our last and final guest is Jean-Marie Accart, fame of GP Paris and second place finish at the most recent Bazaar Moxon. So,
hi everyone.
Yeah, so first we're going to start off with everybody's kind of Bazaar Moxon deck choices and their finish and kind of any particular innovating that anybody did and their experience. So, Julian, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, I guess no big surprise. I was playing Elves at the Bazaar of Moxon. Unfortunately, it didn't go as well as the last one. And if there's anything you want to know about my list, I guess it's mostly for the sideboard, because I was expecting a lot of miracles. I actually decided to play some more grindy, long game oriented cards in the sideboard to also stay in the chance against most of the other grindy decks like Chant, which I expected, and yeah, maybe even some kind of bug control. So from the standard sideboard, most of you guys know, I actually added Sylvan Library as well as a Surgical Extraction, because my reasoning was that Surgical Extraction is awesome against Miracles if you manage to hit the Terminus, because most of the time when playing Elves, the first Terminus isn't as devastating as the second or third one. So with the knowledge of no Terminus left in their deck, it's actually a pretty easy matchup. And it should work, but of course only one surgical extraction isn't going to be enough. So what I'm looking at right now is increase the number of planeswalkers in the Elf sideboard, as I tried before but never really got around to test. And yeah, so that's for my deck choice. For the main event, it's pretty anticlimactic. I had two buys. First round, actually the first round I played, which was the third round, I played against Miracles. I lost the first game. Second game, I get down Nulrod and Pithing Needle, naming Chase, which is pretty good, but he naturally flips Terminus, which happens, I guess, and naturally flips Angels, which also happens, and I just lose. The following rounds, I kind of get destroyed by what I consider one of the breakout cards of the tournament, which is Toxic Deluge. I played against a dedicated Toxic Deluge control deck, which seems pretty good against Elves, and it just destroyed me. I mean, even if you get down Progenitus, paying 10 life isn't that much of a problem if you can't get early beats in. And yeah, so I play Cable Therapy on turn 2, name Toxic Deluge, hit, flashback for Cage. Next turn he top decks Envelope for my Natural Order, I guess that happens. The turn after he rips Toxic Deluge again, and I'm pretty much out. So it's kind of sad, because I expected more of the tournament, but, well, that's just how it goes sometimes.
You just wanted to back-to-back win.
Well, at least I wanted to do well, considering that it's 10 rounds and I had two buys. It would have been much easier to top 8 again than last time, but I guess I don't know. I don't want to say I hang on to Elves too much. I still believe it's pretty good, but right now the meta is very hostile, and maybe I should have chosen a different deck.
When you say you want to play more Planeswalkers, you were thinking about Garruk Relentless?
Yeah, actually that was like one of my first choices, but I feel that Garruk Relentless might not be good enough in what he does. In the side events later I tried Garruk, Primal Hunter, I guess, which was 5 mana. And there was actually a problem of not being able to cast Garruk Primal Hunter most of the time. So what I'm looking at right now is actually Garruk Wildspeaker, the very first one. Because the ultimate is pretty good. The +1 ability is okay, yeah, with Cradle. And the -1 ability is okay against Miracles. So even though I would much rather try Liliana, double black is pretty hard. And yeah, so I want to try Wildspeaker.
And it's good with Cradle sometimes.
Yeah.
Or was Surgical, by the way?
Well, I played in some of the trials and later in the smaller tournaments against Miracles, and I hit like the second Entreat the Angels or Terminus, and it was actually pretty good. but the problem is, of course, only having one is not very reliable, so I would at least have to go up to two, and then you're running pretty low on space in the sideboard anyways, but
Will
I have to
you
think
use
about
it on
that.
a fetch land to play a Cabal Therapy?
I play what?
Will you use it on a fetch land to play Cabal Therapy optimally?
I guess I don't think so. Unless I'm playing against combo like Show and Tell, and I really have to hit, otherwise, I guess I don't.
Okay.
Okay, so with Julian you're kind of done, then we can move on to Mark.
Alright, my Bazaar Moxon experience in Legacy, I chose to play Death and Taxes. I looked especially at the GP Paris results, and I was expecting the decks that did well there to show up in large numbers at the Bazaar Moxon. And so that was Miracles and Bug Delver. And any bug deck is very, very good for Death and Taxes. And there is some, I guess, controversy with the Death and Taxes versus Miracles matchup. Some people think it's favored for Miracles, some think it's favored for Death and Taxes. And I strongly believe that if you're a decent Death and Taxes pilot and you're facing an average Miracles pilot, you are very much favored. And so I chose Death and Taxes for that tournament because I thought it was very well positioned. And I didn't make any extremely odd decisions about the deck. I don't think I played 0 Spirit of the Labyrinth. I played 1 Grimace. I played an Enlightened Tutor sideboard, and I had 1 buy for the tournament. And in the second round, I played against Farmville, the Supreme Verity Force of Will lands deck, which I beat pretty easily. And then I played Elves, which is by far the worst matchup for Death and Taxes. And I was hoping to not run into a lot of Elves, but I ran into Elves in round 3 and actually managed to win. And on the back of Aven Mind Sensor, which I almost cut both Aven Mind Sensors before the tournament because it's such a terrible card in most matchups. It's 2-1 and it's just not really what you want to do. But against Elves, it's great if you can actually get to the 3 mana before they.
I think Aven Mind Sensor was quite popular in the latest deck lists because of evasion against True Name Nemesis.
Yes,
they max out
absolutely.
on the number of flyers.
Yeah, the deck has changed a lot since True Name Nemesis, and the addition of a bunch of flyers has been an important change to the deck. But it's just it has evasion, which is great. But then I just cut it for Flicker Wisp, and then I cut a Grimace for Mirror Crusader. Flicker Wisp is amazing in the deck, and I would much rather have that in most situations than an Aven Mind Sensor. Since ideally Aven Mind Sensor should also stop Stoneforges from fetching equipment, but Stoneforges almost always comes down on turn 2, so it doesn't really stop them most of the time. Anyways, I actually managed to squeeze out a win against Elves and won the match too. And so I was 3-0, and then I ran into the mirror, and I think the mirror is extremely skill intensive. I actually mentioned on stream a couple of days ago that I think that Death and Taxes the mirror is as close as you come to chess in Legacy, at least, because it's all going on the board. Basically, there's very few surprises. There's of course vials on different numbers that can surprise you, but most of the time the tricks are going on the board. There's First Strike, there's Caracas, there's Revoke or Smother Runes, there's Flyers, and so on and so forth. And I think I'm definitely better than my opponent since he misses stuff like bouncing my Thalia with Caracas. But in the end, I have him dead on board in game 3, and then he draws a 2-outer and will if leads to put me dead. I'm on 4 and he has 0 in there. So I lose there, and in the next round I face Shardless BUG, which I love that I got paired against that deck, and he's almost dead in game 1, and then he plays Knights of Souls Betrayal.
Main deck?
Main deck.
Main deck?
Main deck, Knights of Souls Betrayal. And then all my
Welcome to my world.
I have Phyrexian Revoker, Flicker Wisp, Aven Mind Sensor, and Thalia in play, and he plays Knights of Souls Betrayal. And then I draw nothing but X1s and lose the game. Next game I get Null Rotted plus Gogai Charmed out of the game, and that's it. Then I'm knocked out of top 8, and I actually drop at 3-2 to go get food and stuff, because we had trouble getting food on the first day because it was like a holiday or something. So I dropped at 3-2, and that's was my legacy portion.
And Jean-Marie?
Yeah, so I was already playing Shardless BUG. I name it Toxic Agent now sometimes. Before Nemesis came out, it was my favorite deck at that time. So there were two issues with Nemesis. I had some planeswalkers, and Nemesis you can block Nemesis attacking your planeswalkers. That could be a problem. Liliana doesn't always kill it, like if he has Stormforge or something like that. And second problem is that Nemesis warped the metagame at the beginning into a much more combo-ish metagame, and combo decks are what you really don't want to face, at least main deck and in the way I build the deck. Short after GP Paris, a friend of mine, Tristan, told me he had good success with 3 Toxic Deluge main deck. It felt like a good complement to Liliana to deal with Nemesis without playing any targeted cards for it. By playing Deluge main, you deal very well with the Swarm, so you can concentrate for the most part in the sideboard on combo decks. And since I have Deluge to deal with Swarm decks, I could cut the Whip Flare I have been running. I don't know if you want to talk about it also. I could cut it and test the White Splash I wanted to play for a long time. Since Meddling Mage is the card that is useful against the wide range of combo decks that exist in Legacy. It's always good as soon as you can cast it, or even if you just pitch it to Force of Will. So it was promising, and the decklist worked out pretty well right from the beginning, and I just had to tweak it after for the bomb.
Okay, so now when you were at GP Paris and you top 8'd last time, you were playing Imperial Painter, correct?
Correct.
So what made you switch? What made Imperial Painter a poor choice for you for the Bazaar Moxen?
I don't think it was a poor choice, but I was really interested in Shardless. I think the main thing I could say about this is that from my experience in Legacy, it's very possible that the strongest deck or the strongest decks are the least weak decks. Shardless BUG has very few angles of attack, and I mean against it there are very few angles of attack, and there was the mana base, but I even solved it quite well, not perfectly but quite well by playing 2 basics. So on the other hand, Painter is there is a bit more variance with it, like in every deck without cantrips, and I think people were expecting a bit more, and another change was that Miracles, which was a consideration at the time, was now a very big consideration, and I'm not sure the matchup is that favorable. I think it's maybe 50-50. I don't know. I didn't test much, but I wasn't all on Painter for the GP Paris until 3 days before the GP. I never played the deck before the trials in the GP Paris. I just figured out it was the perfect choice for the metagame I expected on day 2, like 2 or 3 days ago. Before, I mean.
So I have another question about your deck list. So you played the one of Tombstalker, and I'm just wondering, was that just because you didn't want to deluge? You just wanted another beater that had evasion and didn't get deluged away usually?
I don't like having too many answers in general, and especially in a deck with several Lilianas. Because if you want to +1, you lose a removal. So it seemed a good idea to add another Vrit to the deck. It could have been a Planeswalker, but the curve was already quite high, so we wanted a beater. something that stays if I play Deluge most of the time. And Tombstalker was the best we could find. I think we have too few green sources for scavenging ooze. Trigon Predator is a possibility, but I like having a big fatty that can, when it comes down, it just stops their attacks. It can block right away, so that I have more chances to go into the long game, which you definitely want to do with Shardless.
Okay. And when you've been playing Toxic Deluge, how many times have you had to, say, get rid of your own Shardless agents or Deathrite Shamans? Have you found that the collateral damage or possible collateral damage from Toxic Deluge is worth the risk?
Generally, you plan accordingly, so it's okay. But when you really need Deluge, like against Swarm decks like Death and Taxes, even if you have like Deathrite and Shardless in play, and there are 3 creatures in front of you from the opponent side, if you play Deluge, you have a 3 cards against 3 cards. But even 3 cards against 3 cards is good for you, because the longer is the game, the best it is for you, because you have draw spells, because you have expensive spells like Jace, because you have a Sylvan Library. And the more you play Shardless agents, the better it is.
I have to say, I really liked your inclusion of the basic lands. I know in my list that I test against, I've definitely put in
You
a
can.
couple of basics.
I had a forest in the sideboard in my Whipflare version, and I really liked it, but it wasn't possible to play it with Baleful Strix. With Deluge, you cut Strixes because it's a non-bow, so no, you can afford to play it.
Did you ever get Blood Moon in the entire tournament?
Round 4, I faced a Painter player, a pretty good player actually, and it was 2-0, quite easy.
Oh, wow.
I had every good draws I could have.
Any changes that you would make to this list?
No. I was quite sure of the list long before the bomb. I stopped testing like 3 weeks before the bomb because I was sure about the list and I had to prepare PT Block Constructed in Atlanta. And after the tournament, I don't want to change anything.
Excellent. Well, that's a good sign. Okay, so Julian wanted to talk about 2 buys for a 10-round tournament. What were you thinking about that?
Yeah, what I was looking at is, even before the tournament, it was announced that it was gonna be like 10 rounds. And people are usually fine with having 2 or 3 buys because they're used to GPs where you have 15 rounds. But if you look at it, if you only get 10 rounds, 2 or 3 buys, that's like 20 or 30% of the rounds already won. And even though Jean-Marie was the only one who had 3 buys because he won a trial at the last year.
I think there were 2 people, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for you, I'm actually in a way even fine because you're probably one of the top 10 legacy players in the world. So, I mean, at least it wasn't some random person. But I mean, if I want to talk about it in general, I feel that's almost too much. I mean, even 2 buys, and I had 2 buys, felt like kind of strange and unfair because with 2 buys, you only, you see me make quotation marks in the air, you only have to win 6 rounds to get top 8. And some other persons have to like fight for 2 more rounds, and I feel it's kind of unjustified. I can see why they have that, because they wanna, of course, they wanna make money off the trials on Thursday, but I would actually be much happier if they only gave out like 1 buy for the winner of such trials, and not have that amount of buys for such a more or less short tournament.
3 buys was definitely an exception. If they were giving 3 buys at the time I won them. Because they didn't know the formula they would apply for this bomb.
Yeah, I talked to Kevin about it, and he told me that they actually planned to have a 2-day event, but after the Bazaar in Paris, they decided that it wasn't really feasible, and they went back to the 1 tournament on 1-day format.
Marc, what do you think?
I think that I definitely think there's too many bias here, and it's not just because I lost in the finals of the trial, but I think having people just automatically having won already 20% or 30% of the rounds, I think that's makes for an unfair advantage. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, when I host events, I mean, I do buys for my events, and usually I only do one buy. I've never done two buys, because usually my events are 6 rounds, so, having 16 and 2/3% win rate going in, that seems enough.
Yeah.
I agree. Two buys is a bit too much in the context of just competitive play, but I think there are other factors, and the fact that they can make money outside of the tournament is definitely important if we want them to organize more events like this. I think it's a concession we have to make, even if it's maybe not optimal. Two buys drains much more players in the trials than one.
That's a good point. What was it? Yeah. Also, the people getting buys are and playing in trials are often the more competitive people. So you have more competitive people at the top. I think because they grind trials to try and get buys. So there's definitely also a difference between the kind of players that have buys usually and the people that don't.
Yeah, I think we're kind of all in agreement that there's too many buys, but tournament organizers are looking to make a little bit of money. I mean, the prizes for this Legacy were actually, in my opinion, very good. It was black bordered set of power for first and unlimited set of power for second?
Yeah, usually always the same set of power because nobody takes it.
So I'm assuming that there was some sort of cash incentive or buyback?
Yes, absolutely. The store usually buys the set of power back.
You don't have to confirm or deny, Jean-Mary, if you took the power or not, but
I even know the amount of money, but I guess we're not gonna talk about that. But generally speaking about the Bazaar of Moxon, it's kind of a shame that they actually lost money. They lost money this year, and they lost money at the last Bazaar of Moxon in Paris. And
Oh, really?
yeah, they did. On the last night, I had a talk with Kevin, who's kind of the head of the Bazaar of Moxon, and he seemed, I don't want to say concerned, but he thought a lot about how to, establish...
increase revenue?
Yeah, I think he's really dedicated about this, and it doesn't seem so much about revenue, but only in the way that he wants to have it sustainable in the long run. And what he kind of complained to me about is that people don't see how much legacy prices went up. Like, if you want to buy duels or whatever, you pay like double the price of some years ago. And they increased the buy-in and the entry fee for the tournaments, but that doesn't really compensate for how much money they now have to spend to actually acquire the stuff. He even told me, like, for some prices, they actually have to find the prices, the duel lands or whatever, during the tournament to give them out. Because they are actually, it's getting harder and harder to get everything. And what he considers right now is to lower the entry fee back to like 35 euros for the main events, but also decrease price support. And I think it's going to be really hard to sell to people that price support is going to be decreased, but looking at how much all the staples went up over the last years, I think there's not another way we can actually take, so...
Did they lose money on the main event or on the Bazaar of Moxen?
They lost money on the Legacy main event because they expected like over 600. They said like 630, I believe, would have been okay, but it was like 500 whatever, and that's where they lost money.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, here one of the problems is this. Because the cost increase in the prizes, when you advertise a prize pool, the prize pool is less because you have to assume that, the amount of players is not going to go up double. You're not going to get double the amount of players in to support double the amount of, the cost increase in the prizes. So the problem is, say, for example, I host a tournament, and this is actually the trouble we had recently. So if I plan, say, 4 months in advance, I say, okay, play set of Underground Seas. Okay, at the time, that was like a $600 prize. There's no problem. 4 months roll by, and you kind of go, oh, first prize actually has to be changed to 2 Underground Seas. So how attractive is it for a player to come for a tournament where the first prize is 2 Underground Seas when in people's minds the price memory is so much less, and it's much less attractive, and people kind of don't realize that these cards cost a lot of money.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to raise awareness for, because if Kevin actually does what he thinks about right now, which is to decrease price. I don't even want to say price support. He just wants to decrease prices so he can lower entry fees, so that people don't act like out of the blue, oh my god, what's happening? This is awful, and actually like have some thought about it before the next Bazaar of Moxen. What actually needs to change, because we all want to have this tournament, and it's really gotta be sustainable. And honestly, for me, I feel I don't mind what the prices are like. I mean, if the entry fee goes down and the prices kind of remain sustainable, and I win the whole thing, it's just gonna be awesome. And I don't mind like winning 1,000 euros more or less. But that's just me. And yeah, it would be really really sad if people who could go to the Bazaar of Moxen wouldn't go because of a difference of like 20 euros for the entry fee or whatever. I mean, you pay like several hundred euros to get there and play. So if the entry fee is slightly higher, please still play. And if it's lower, also please still play. Like don't give so much about price support, because what I feel is like the Bazaar of Moxen is actually not gonna rip anybody off on prices. And the splits they proposed, at least for the last Bazaar of Moxen in Paris, was really fair. So yeah, that's what I wanted to get out there.
We also probably lost some players by putting the main event on a Friday and the modern on the Saturday. If they probably should next year if put like the vintage on Friday and the two most popular events formats into the weekend.
That sounds reasonable. I also want to just mention, as a competitive player, I would rather have them raise entry fees than actually lower price support, because like Bazaar Moxen is one of their highest profile, if not the highest profile, eternal tournament in the world, and especially vintage also. And so people come for awesome prizes, and if you put in a lot of money to actually join the tournament, you can get much more out of it too, which I think is what a competitive player, someone coming there to actually win the event, wouldn't mind paying extra. But of course, there's the more casual appeal, which would be like lowering price support and lowering entry fees there.
One idea to keep as many casual players as possible would be also to run small fees trials, so that people can play for their money for the whole weekend when they obviously don't come to win.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I mean, I'm definitely in favor of raising price support. I mean, we pay how many hundreds of dollars for cards, and people are going to complain about a $15 to $20 increase in an entry fee? Like, that's the thing I don't understand about a lot of players is, sure, you're willing to spend like $4,000 to $5,000 on a deck, but suddenly $20 is too expensive?
Yeah, that's also a good point. People willing to travel hundreds and sometimes thousands of kilometers to an event like Bazaar of Moxen, they I think most are willing to pay an additional fee for entry to the tournament.
Okay. I'm just trying to see, because a lot of these stories, or a lot of these things that you listed, Julian, are just going to basically be you talking a lot.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like the other guys might have more stories.
So if you guys have any stories, if we want to start with Jean-Marie, if you want to think of any stories, maybe funny things that happened, good things that happened, bad things that happened.
I've been told one by a player. He was playing in Legacy, and his opponent goes turn 0 ley line of anticipation. He expects
Awesome.
like me to face opalescence. I don't know if it's the English name.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. But it goes like turn 1 end of turn ponder, turn 2 snare something, turn 3 end of turn top. The guy who told me the story goes painter for blue, and the guy goes end of turn trinket mage to get grindstone.
That's pretty deep. All right, I have a little story. It was about you mentioned misplays as a topic, Julian. I was playing a guy playing Patriot Delver in the Legacy side event, and he has 2 fetches out and a Tundra and a Wasteland. So I go end of turn Aven Mind Sensor, expecting him to fetch in response or something, or counter it or whatever. And he just has this resolve. Okay, fine. I have Stoneforge on board. I know he flipped his Stellar with Wear Tear, so I know that he has that. And then, but he doesn't have red mana without the fetches. And so next turn, I end of turn put in a Sword of Fire and Ice with Stoneforge, and then he pauses in the end step, and then he puts both his fetches in the graveyard. Okay, I note the life totals, and then he grabs his deck, and I tell him, no, the top 4. Then he reads Aven Mind Sensor, and okay, then he starts looking at the top 4 and tanks for a while, and then he puts them down, and I tell him, okay, now shuffle, and now try for the other fetch. So he just shuffles and presents the deck, and he doesn't want to search again for some reason. So he's just completely wrecked by that Aven Mind Sensor. Now he has Tundra Wasteland, and he's getting destroyed by a sword. And yeah, that was... I ended up actually still losing to that guy, but I thought that was pretty funny.
Oh, wow.
Reading your opponent's cards, still a very good strategy in Legacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, if you want to hear like a strange story about kind of, I don't even want to call it a misplay. So a friend of mine, he was playing this bug control list. He's got Chase in play and 2 creatures, and the opponent is playing Merfolk. So the Merfolk player is like, okay, attack your Chase. The Chase was in 5 counters. So my friend he doesn't even understand the attacks, so because he didn't have Island Walk yet, he just blocks with 2 creatures, and the 2 Merfolk guys die, and would die, and Chase would go down to 2 or 3. So my friend wants to proceed, but the other guy, he's just like, huh. And my friend is like, okay, so these creatures trade, Chase goes down, is it my turn? And the other guy just keeps saying, huh, So they eventually call a judge, and the judge comes over and asks, what's the problem? And the other guy is like, I attack Chase, and my opponent blocks. And then the judge is like, yes. And he's just like, huh.
What?
So, yeah, it was so surreal. It's totally unreal because I didn't understand what was the problem. So they talk about it for a while, and after that it becomes apparent that the other guy didn't know that you could actually block when your planeswalker is being attacked.
Oh,
So,
no.
yeah, that was kind of a blowout for him. On the next turn, he plays Standstill, and then attacks with Muta Vault. Not on the next turn, Chase was already gone, and so at some point he plays Standstill, and then attacks with the Muta Vault. My friend activates Mishra's Factory, blocks, and pumps it. And the other guy again is like, oh, huh. So post-combat he plays Wasteland and kills the factory. That was awesome, watching that.
Well, he definitely learned something. You can tell the wheels were turning inside of his head, right?
Oh, for sure. You could really see.
You could see the smoke coming out as well.
Oh yeah. Especially since he won that match, because he played 3 True Name Nemesis afterwards, and yeah, that's all she wrote.
Any more stories before we...
Well, stories, I mean, there are a lot of good stories, for example, about Niklas, who won the finals against Jean-Marie. Niklas is a very, let's say, a good friend of mine, long-term Magic friend of mine, and it's kind of funny because like 2 years ago, Niklas stopped playing Legacy. He was like this very committed, heavily invested Legacy dude, who's now turned into a modern dude, which is so sad, but yeah, I guess that's, he's still got it. He still got it. And the night before the Legacy main event, he and his friends actually almost get kicked out of the hotel because they were partying so hard that I guess they didn't take Legacy as serious as we did. And yeah, so the morning he looks totally wasted. I ask him what's up, and he tells me, yeah, they kicked us out of the hotel. Fortunately, they were allowed back in for one more night, and yeah, that's Niklas for you.
So what ended up happening? Like, he just threw the deck together?
Usually he and his friend David, they brew up a list like several days, maybe even weeks before the tournament, and yeah, play what they like. That's what they did. What they did for the past Legacy GPs. For example, at the Bazaar of Moxen in Paris, which was the last time Niklas actually played Legacy, he showed up to the tournament not willing to play in the Legacy main event, so we actually convinced him to still play Legacy. So he just put together some cards for a Merfolk deck, and he came 1 win short of top 8 in the Legacy main event, which seems pretty good.
Yeah, seems pretty decent. I just don't know how he didn't get hated out as a loam deck. I mean, Rest in Peace just really, really kills you.
Yeah, but was Rest in Peace really that much of a big player for this tournament? I didn't think so.
But if you're
There was
playing,
barely any graveyard hit.
I mean, if I were playing either Miracles or Death and Taxes, I'd be running 2 of in the sideboard.
Yeah, two.
That's not a lot still. I mean, people used to play main deck Rest in Peace.
Yes, 3 DKs, and did you have something in the sideboard to deal with Rest in Peace?
I don't have the list right here right now, but
I'm looking at his list right now. He ran Choke, Canonist, Leeline of the Void, Ancient Grudge, Caselli. So he ran 1 Caselli Pride Mage in the side to deal with it, and just the 3 Abrupt Decay in the main.
And 2 Grayson Zeniths.
Yes.
but honestly,
still-
really, Graveyard Hate didn't strike me as one of the most played sideboard cards, anyways.
That's probably true. It's just Rest in Peace knocks out, you say you've built up a graveyard when you're playing Aggro Loam, which you usually do.
But you can still like save your loam with a cycle land, and then abrupt decay the Rest in Peace and keep going.
Yeah, it still hurts, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, did you want to talk to us about your cheating thing, Julian?
Yeah, in the vintage main event. Oh man, that was. Oh, I hated that. I mean, I'm laughing about it now because the outcome was perfectly fine and nothing happened. But so I'm playing in the vintage main event. I borrowed a vintage deck from a friend of mine, and it's round 6, I believe. No, it's round 7, round 8. I don't even know. I'm 5-2, 6-2, whatever. Like in one of the last rounds, and I'm playing against this guy. I'm winning the first round, and before the second round, we actually get a deck check, like a mid-round deck check. It was the second deck check I got in the tournament, so I felt perfectly safe, and what could happen to me? I mean, my deck list has already been checked, so maybe he gets a game list, but whatever. So after like 10 minutes, Kim Warren, which is the recently level 4 European judge, walks up and asks me for an interview. So at that moment, I already felt like, what's happening? I don't know. So we walked to the interview, and she just casually asks, "Do you play a lot of vintage?" And I don't know. And it really felt like something was up. And so I told her I had borrowed the deck, and she said it was going pretty well for me, but at like 5 or 6-2, it didn't really feel like it was going well. But whatever. So the problem was, she showed me my deck, and there was a problem with the sleeves. And when I had borrowed the deck, a friend of mine had looked at the deck, and he had told me, "Oh, it looks like you're using 2 different kind of sleeves." So I looked at the sleeves, and I didn't see it. To me, it looked pretty much all the same. So to make sure I wouldn't get into trouble, I considered getting new sleeves. But when I wanted to buy new sleeves, they didn't have KMCs. They only had Dragon Shields, and I really, really don't like... I mean, Dragon Shields are okay, but I love KMCs. So instead of buying the Dragon Shields, I walked to Jeremy, which is a level 3 judge I met earlier, like some years ago, and I asked him, "Hey Jeremy, can you take a look at my deck and tell me if I'm allowed to play these sleeves?" So he looks at the deck, he hands it to another judge, he also looks at the deck, and they tell me, "Yeah, no problem, thumbs up, you can play these sleeves." So yeah, I think in the end it was kind of my really one of the things that got me out, that I asked before about the sleeves, so they actually trusted me on this. Because when Kim showed me the sleeves, they showed me, I'm sorry, showed me 7 cards, only the backs, and she showed me how these sleeves were different, because the very top was super flat, and there was no wear on them, like you have on older sleeves. So I feel like, oh yeah, you're right, these sleeves look different. And at that moment, I still feel like, yeah, okay, I'm so stupid, should have changed sleeves, so I'm gonna get a game loss, and then we continue playing. But then, she flips over the sleeves, and it's 4 Force of Will and 3 Mental Misstep. And at that moment, I knew exactly that this was much more of a problem than I thought at first. Because that's basically all the free counter magic you have in my deck. And she also told me, well, this is a big problem. And really, at that moment, I just played Vintage like because it's vintage and you get to play it like once a year, and I really didn't want to get into trouble. And when she showed me these 7 cards, I felt like, oh my god, I wanted to throw up almost. And I mean, in the end, we talked about it for like almost half an hour, and she told me that she trusts me and she believes me that I didn't intentionally like mark these cards, and it was just like something she would have to give me a game loss for. And that was perfectly fine. After all, it's still my mistake that I signed up with a deck that had like worn sleeves and others were different. But oh man, even thinking about it now, I really felt like, come on, what's happening here? I can't believe this. Yeah, so in the end, she tells me she will have to give me a game loss and help me re-sleeve the deck. And when we are almost done re-sleeving the deck, and I think about going back to the match and play the last game, because then it would have been 1-1, another judge comes over and tells me, yeah, by the way, your opponent had a decklist error and you won the match 2-1. And at that moment,
Wow.
I really, yeah, it felt like I mean, I wanted to be happy because at that moment I was really happy that I didn't get into any further trouble, but also feeling happy felt kind of strange because I had just gotten a game loss and had been in this super strange situation. But yeah, that's my Bazaar of Moxen vintage for you. I mean, in the end, I actually
Yeah, that
placed.
reminds me of
Sorry.
a story from a friend of mine a few years ago in Vintage. The big Vintage tournament at the time. He buys new sleeves. He plays first round, second round deck check, disqualification for marked sleeves.
Oh.
In fact, he was playing Echoid, and the only cards that were tapped were the Bazaar of Baghdad, and like the table must have been like not really clean, and they were all 4 marked.
Oh, that's so unlucky.
That's something to watch out for.
That happened to me at GP Providence, not the exact same, but basically I had bought 2 packs of Ultra Pro sleeves from one of the vendors, and I didn't notice that they weren't exactly the same size, so when I sleeved my deck up, I shuffled it and whatever. Then I got a deck check maybe round 5, and they're like, yeah, your sleeves are marked, what's going on? And I'm like, I just bought them from the vendor. So, of course, they're like, well, you need to change your sleeves, buy new sleeves. So I went back to the vendor, and I'm like, well, I need 2 of the same size sleeves. And he's just like, well, you know, sometimes some are cut one way, some are cut another. I can't guarantee anything. And I said, well, can I at least open them up and, like, check to see to make sure they're the same thing? No, you open them, you bought them. I'm like, ugh. That was pretty terrible.
That's kind of awful considering that you're like at a competitive event and he's there to provide tournament material, and then he's just like, yeah, whatever.
So complacent, just gives 0 shits about me. He's just like, you get disqualified? Whatever. Your $5 doesn't matter to me. Oh, man. So, how is the security at Bazaar Moxen?
Pretty good, I guess. I feel there were no issues really. Did you encounter anything?
I didn't hear about any problem.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
That's because we have Mr. Blonde. You know that guy? He's at all the big tournaments, and to me, he's like Mr. Blonde from now on. He's got this blonde ponytail. I mean, I guess he's doing a pretty good job because there's never really any kind of problem. So, hooray for Mr. Blonde.
I guess he just intimidates everyone into not stealing each other's decks.
Probably.
So, did you guys play against, any of you play against, a really pimped out deck at all? Or did you play a really pimped out deck?
Well, the Death Tax guy I played, his friend was also playing Death Tax, and he had the deck foiled out. And foiled ports and foiled wasteland and stuff. That's a little spicy, and foiled stone fortress and stuff. And it made me want to foil out Death Taxes too, actually. So I think I'm gonna work on that for the next months.
Yeah, for me it's Elves. Elves is pretty much pimped out, except for the fetch lands. Because pimping out 9 fetch lands is like an additional 1,000 euros. Maybe not 1,000, but almost. But except for the fetch lands, I mean, even the Gaia's Cradles and stuff is foil, so it looks pretty cool. I like it.
Jean-Marie?
I'm not into this kind of things, so I don't even remember if I faced one. I probably didn't even notice. I'm like in the match, in the game, and that's all.
Somebody plays something super insane against you and you're just like, meh, not impressed.
In Vintage, somebody played Beta Underground Seas and Summer Basic Lands against me. And that was really impressive. I mean, I still won because he didn't know the rules of the game, despite spending like the amount of money it takes to buy a new car on his deck. But yeah, it was really, really impressive.
Don't you hate that, though? Somebody's like, oh, I can't play at all, and then it's like, those kids back in, high school who had, the most expensive clothes, and they were just, the most uncoordinated and awful people in the world? Do you know what I mean?
I don't hate that. I don't even mind it. I mean, if I'm better than my opponent and I win, I don't care what the deck looks like. I mean, he got the guy. He must have been playing Vintage for ages. He told me he was a Vintage expert. He played Chugmoth's Will, played a cantrip, fizzled on the cantrip, and then after thinking about it for a while, he tried to cycle rebuild from the graveyard. And I'm pretty sure that's not possible. I told him I have concerns about that, but he was like, no, I'm a Vintage expert, no problem, that's possible. So, I don't know, maybe we should color touch. No, we don't have to color touch. I guess now we have to color touch. So it turns out you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, part of the cost is discarding it.
Yeah, it's also, you can, Chugmoth will say you may play or cast or whatever, and cycling is never playing, so yeah. But I mean, I don't want to say I had problems with people in Vintage about rules, but I definitely recognize that there's certainly a lack of awareness for the new trigger policies. And usually I hate being like rules lawyering my opponents about triggers, but especially when you're playing like the Vintage main event and there's quite a lot of money on the line after all. When people don't stack their triggers correctly or not at all, I'm not going to allow for a take back. And it came up especially with Dark Confident. When you have Dark Confident and your opponent has Tanglewire, and I had never encountered that that interaction before, but it became apparent to me that when I put Dark Confident on the stack and I ask for whether Dark Confident resolves, and he says yes, that he can't put Tanglewire on the stack anymore because of active player, non-active player, and like all my stack's opponents, they misplayed this, and it felt so awful because it felt like hurting a helpless child that didn't know what happened, because I told him, no, you cannot put Tanglewire on the stack anymore. And he didn't understand. But I also didn't tell him to call a judge if he doesn't understand, because he agreed that he couldn't put Tanglewire on the stack, although he didn't really know why. So on the next turn, I put that Confidant on the stack again. I resolve it. He says yes. I reveal, and then he wants to put Tanglewire on the stack, and again he didn't understand it. It felt so awful, because this guy, you could clearly tell that he was only playing for fun, and he completely didn't understand what's going on. But really, that it hurts me in a way, like deep down in my soul as a Magic player, because I think, I don't know, this is not the optimal way to play Magic with the current trigger policies. But I think we shouldn't really get into too much of a talk about triggers. But these people, they come to the Bazaar of Moxen, they want to have fun, they want to meet their friends, and they just want to casually play. But if I top 8 and I win like a lot of money. So I can't really give him the edge of not knowing rules and still getting away with it. So I feel bad about it, but I guess that's you have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so, but Sean, I don't know if you guys read, but Sean, the other host of our cast, was talking about how he was watching footage and saw some Stacks player who was continually, missing his, like, Lodestone Golem / Sphere triggers, and watching his opponent pay for stuff. So obviously knowing that this Sphere is still working, just, very casually just casting things.
So that's every time that's game rule violation. So every time you cast, you pay too little for a spell, you'll get a warning. So that should add up to a game loss pretty quickly.
And didn't Levy get out of the commentator stand to go tell a floor judge to do their job?
Yeah, I heard that. I heard like he stood up, ran over, and interrupted the match. I didn't see it, but I heard about that.
Yeah, so I think people are a little bit complacent maybe in, I don't know, maybe it's just Vintage specifically, because it's kind of this format's expensive and I've played this forever, let's just play very casually. And like Julian was saying, I don't think that's the way to do it in any format, especially when there's, 4 digits worth of prizes on the line.
Now that you mentioned 4 digits, it's kind of funny, because when the top 8 of the Vintage main event was announced, people were asked whether they want to split. And the money they offered for the split was like, I think, 450 euros for everyone in the top 8. And one of the guys, he came up to us and he asked us, is this enough? And Philipp Schöniger, who was also traveling with us, he was like, oh my god, you have to go for it. Oh, this is insane. Take that split. Take it. And I felt like, well, 540 euros, it's okay. You can still play for it. And Philipp was like, no, you'd have to take it. It's insane. And I felt like, okay, he seems really sure about this. I don't know. Okay, maybe you should do it. So it turns out Philipp just misread was what was written on the piece of paper. He thought it was like 4,500 euros. That's insane, and he totally talked the guy into accepting the split. So I don't know what happened to Philip if he thinks like 4,500 euros is a split for top 8 in vintage.
Yeah, the $32,000 purse or €32,000 purse. Yeah,
Oh man.
So what do you guys think the future of Bazaar of Moxon is? Because I know Julian was saying he talked with the event organizer, but you guys were there. Is it growing? Is it decreasing?
But it was about the same number in Legacy as the last Bazaar of Moxon, right?
No, the last Bazaar of Moxon was like 700, and this was like 500. I don't know, 30.
I think attendance in Legacy is very slowly decreasing, but very slowly, and Modern is rising. So I think Modern is the future of Bazaar of Moxon. But no, I don't think we have to worry too much about Legacy being a big format in it, or not being.
Decreasing is what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, it's decreasing a bit. But there was like a bigger drop this year, but I think it's really linked to the choice of putting Main Event Legacy on fire.
Julian?
Yeah, I talked to Kevin about this, as I mentioned, and he really wants to get like a second Bazaar of Moxon going at some point again, but Paris is just not sustainable money-wise, because without the support of Wizards of the Coast, who helped host the GP Paris, they can't really do it on their own.
Yeah, the places are very expensive.
Yeah, so Kevin talked to me about, because the Bazaar of Moxon crew, they are also organizing the GP Strasbourg later this year. He mentioned that they might do something during GP Strasbourg, like an Eternal event, but he didn't really sound too sure about it. So don't put me up for that. I'm not sure if that's gonna happen. But from what I feel, he really wants to keep going and grow and like keep. I don't know, it sounds strange. Keep being the Bazaar of Moxon, like this big, traditional, super classic, cool Eternal event that basically all the Americans envy us for, and we envy them for the Star City game series. So I guess that's okay. But I wouldn't feel like Bazaar of Moxon is dying, as some people might have thought. It's just like we have to find a new formula for prices and entry fees, and the way the tournament gets organized. Like which days, and Friday was definitely a problem, and the Bazaar of Moxon crew, they know themselves. So, yeah, I'm quite optimistic about the future of Bazaar of Moxon, honestly.
Awesome. Any closing statements, comments, anything about Bazaar of Moxon or Legacy in general?
I wonder if we could organize it abroad, outside of France, like in Belgium, or maybe they could put cash prizes in other countries, because I think the legislation is what prevents that in France.
Yeah, that could be interesting. I mean, I definitely think I would be interested in having even though there's Eternal Weekend in North America, I still think having, a Bazaar of Moxon type thing would still be, in addition to that, would be nice, especially on the West Coast. A lot of the legacy events or big legacy events in North America are always on the East Coast, and it's kind of not fair. So it'd be nice to definitely have something like that, maybe in California or something like that. So.
Or Vancouver.
Yeah, or Vancouver. Well, I'm working on it.
Okay.
We're getting up there.
There's also Danish Legacy Masters this weekend, actually, and I think that has continued to grow. Last time we were 130 people, and that's depending on. I mean, they're pretty serious about it, the organizers, but depending on a lot of things, I guess that will continue to grow, which I think is exciting, especially for the Scandinavian or Nordic legacy community.
Yeah, I wish I could go, but I'm going to GP Warsaw. But that should definitely be an awesome tournament for you guys.
Yeah.
There's also gonna be a big Eternal event in Prague. I feel it's the first weekend of July, and they're also hosting a Legacy, Modern, and I also believe Vintage tournament. And Prague or Wall is pretty cheap, so if you're anywhere near, you should definitely check that out.
I'd definitely love to go to that, but scheduling conflicts already.
I just wanted. I think we should also mention that Marc was partnered on Twitch, which is awesome. He really deserves it.
Okay.
Yeah, we should
Is
definitely mention that.
that worth mentioning?
Oh fuck! You know how many people tune in just to hear you?
No.
At least
I don't.
2 or 3.
Yeah, that's what I think. At least 2 or 3.
I think maybe we'll leave the you talking about noble fish for another day. We'll have you
Yeah,
back on,
sure.
and we'll talk about that at another time.
Sure.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say thank you very much to our guests, Julian, Marc, and Jean-Marie, and I'll let them have their outro.
So, oh yeah, Jean-Marie, go first.
What do you want me to say?
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Well, it was a pleasure talking with you guys. See you maybe in another show.
Marc?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was. I hope to be back soon at some point.
Okay, thanks for having me on as well. And yeah, so I don't know what to say. I'll definitely be back with some more Elf streaming later this month. And yeah, see you next time.
Feedback is always appreciated. Email us at everydayeternalcast@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/everydayeternalpodcast, or follow us on Twitter at eternalmtg.